Compass Mining is your trusted partner in Bitcoin mining. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary Bitcoin mining services. We also specialize in large-scale site development and data center operations. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success today. Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Friday afternoon, the very first crypto summit is going on as we speak in Washington, D.C. That's what we're going to be covering in today's presentation. Anthony just put out a great article with Compass Mining. We've got miner price action, trading, and news that we wanted to talk about in today's video. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below what you think will come of today's historic crypto summit, your outlook on the miners, and forecast for Bitcoin price in the next few months. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay, Anthony, Friday afternoon here, final podcast of the week. The crypto summit is going on as we speak in Washington, D.C. We're going to talk about that throughout today's presentation, but interestingly enough and very timely, you were able to get an article out published in Compass Mining just today talking about the case for this U.S. strategic reserve and some of the preamble or lead up to this ultimate decision.
Yeah, I started writing it early this week because we'd been given the notice on this summit and some of the attendees, and I thought it'd be quite a timely one to do. And bear in mind, we were both at Nashville last year when the president and Senator Loomis both came on the stage and talked about the importance of Bitcoin as potentially a US strategic reserve, and that if the president was successful in the election, then this is something that they would be looking into. And absolutely, I mean, you know, you think about the timing in the short space he's been in the chair and how many things he's managed to get through. It was come as no shock that yesterday he signed the first executive order on putting Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. Now, that's not the end of the game, you know, by no means. There still has to be a vote through the Senate, and so there'll be a little bit more of a process to go through, but it's a very, very positive move. And, you know, people will be saying, why is it important? And, you know, you just got to look around the economies of the world and, you know, seeing how they're evolving at the moment. The US dollar was always deemed to be a strong and respected around the world. And in recent years now, you know, we have the digital currencies coming to the forefront. And the dollar has been struggling. So, you know, Trump's obviously very keen. Now, bear in mind, you know, gold used to be the actual reserve to the dollar. There are other types of asset classes that are held as reserves, and we heard some of this in New York, Bryce. I don't know if you remember.
I did. They mentioned a national cheese strategic reserve. Senator Loomis almost poking a little fun. I had heard about the petroleum, the oil and gas, the gold reserves, but never about the cheese reserve, Anthony. You bring up a great point on the executive order last night, getting some additional detail here from the White House, basically stating they're not going to be selling any more Bitcoin. They're looking for ways that are not going to impact taxpayer dollars. So essentially neutral ways of acquiring more Bitcoin. They're not going to be acquiring any additional cryptocurrencies outside of that's been confiscated, and even going on to list a few of these potentially budget or balance sheet neutral ways to acquire Bitcoin. So some great visibility there. And I know in your article, you also talked about the progress the states are making as well. We've covered that extensively on the channel.
Yeah, absolutely. So the meeting today is going ahead with, the CEOs and investors of many of the leading companies involved around the cryptocurrency space. Even the likes of Fred Thiel's been invited today. Kathy Wood, the CEO of ARK, Michael Saylor, who we know, previously the CEO of Strategy, I think now the chairman of strategy. He'll be there. I mean, he can talk very eloquently about the benefits of having Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, and he's done so much over the past 12 months anyway, articulating it on every opportunity on all the major news channels as well. So that'll be a good conversation today. A lot of high powered people in there. Now the issue there is obviously, when Trump spoke the other day, he was not just looking at a Bitcoin strategic reserve, but he was looking at a cryptocurrency strategic reserve, and in the likes of including Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, and last night it was more about having a Bitcoin strategic reserve, and that for us is great news because we're very much focused on the Bitcoin side. There are some uses for some of the other coins, but to have the strategic reserve, we felt the same way as some of these heavy hitting speakers that'll be in the Oval Office today. Bitcoin is probably the way forward. I mean, we've said this many times. If you take the whole of cryptocurrency world and show it in a sort of like a format like a cake and cut it into 10 slices, well, then 6 of those slices of the 20,000 coins represents one coin, Bitcoin. And then you look at Ethereum, which is the second biggest coin, give that 1.5 slices. You've effectively got close to, 3/4 of the cake for 2 coins, which means the other 19,998 coins represent 2.5 slices. And this is why, many people say, why are you including other cryptocurrencies? There's only one real coin out there, Bitcoin, for this particular process, and that's the one that should be used. And it looks like the president he seems to be jumping on the side of that there now. Now, at the state level, things have been moving far quicker at the state level, and we've seen a number of iterations and processes of votes going through a number of the states. And, some of them are renowned for being what we say crypto-friendly states. Texas is a great example of that because, not only one of the biggest states and one of the biggest economies in the world. I think if they were treated as a country, Texas would be in the top 10 countries in the world by GDP. That's how strong that state is. And they've got a huge Bitcoin mining industry there, probably somewhere close to 25 or 30% of all Bitcoin mined around the world is probably mined in Texas. So, that's another reason why everything's positive there. They've just had a recent vote and approved another process, so they're getting very close to getting to the end result of actually formally approving strategic Bitcoin reserve. They could be one of the first states to do it. Utah are also in that position there, and there are probably about 15 or 16 states going through that process. Equally, there are a couple of states that have already decided it's not for them at the moment. Maybe they'll have another look next year. New York, for instance, is very much more a stricter regime when it comes to cryptocurrency companies. They've got what they call a bit license, and so it makes it more challenging. Wyoming's already voted against it. And I think North Dakota also have voted against it at the moment. So, maybe they'll come back in a year's time and relook at it, especially if it goes through at the state and at the national level.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see that play out. And I know we'll get some hate in the comment section for this one, Anthony, but say what you want about Trump and his administration. Bitcoin, despite the pullback, is still up about $30,000 since the election month or day. We've got Ross out of jail on day 2, and it looks like this strategic Bitcoin reserve is coming to fruition, not only on a federal level, but as you mentioned, in dozens and dozens of states as well. So again, we heard at the Bitcoin conference in New York, think of Donald Trump as a buffet or a smorgasbord. You get all different components of Trump. We primarily, as a UK and Canadian citizen here, care about how this is going to impact our wallets, our investments, and our Bitcoin exposure. And on that topic specifically, it seems we are making tremendous strides compared to any other presidential administration in the United States or really around the world.
Yeah, and this meeting today, the strategic Bitcoin reserve, it's more about, what the benefits are about having this there. And Bitcoin, we know, is a great protection against inflation. Inflation really is, effectively price increases. You buy something for $1 today, and next week it could be $1.10. I mean, we were in New York looking at some of the food prices there. Eggs seem to be, going through the roof over there. And even in some of the restaurants we went to, if you ordered eggs as part of your meal, they were charging extra money for the fact you'd had eggs because there was such a shortage of eggs because I think it's something with the bird flu. Inflation is a real issue. Bitcoin hasn't got inflation. There's no limit to how many, there's only 21 million Bitcoin ever going to be produced. And at the moment, we've already produced something like 95% of them. So the remaining 5% gets produced over the next 115 years. And if you think about the debt within the US at the moment, it's already gone past 36 trillion, which is 120% of the country's entire yearly economy. Now, Bitcoin could help provide the solution for this. Unlike dollars, where the government just prints off, money as and when it wants to, there's only going to be 21 Bitcoin produced. So that limited supply makes Bitcoin different from the traditional money and, could make it more valuable if the dollar loses value. By holding the Bitcoin, if the government holds Bitcoin in the same way it holds gold, and I think there's something like $500 billion of gold held in Fort Knox, although we were waiting to hear from the Trump administration. They were going to do an audit, and we'd heard that some of the gold bars were actually painted, bricks painted yellow. So maybe they're getting to the bottom of that one, but time will tell. But by holding Bitcoin the same way that it holds gold and foreign currency, the US government could really diversify its reserves, spreading the risk across different types of assets. Bitcoin's increased since it came into fruition, 15 years ago, when you could have purchased it, for literally cents. We go back to that first purchase with Bitcoin, the $30 for two pizzas, and the guy exchanged the equivalent of 10,000 Bitcoin for that. So just think how much Bitcoin was worth then. And those 10,000 Bitcoin today is worth around about $880 million. So, that's how well Bitcoin's done over that period. Now, it's been a bumpy ride all the way through that period, but it has gone from, literally cents to 88,000 today. And so by the US and other economies embracing this sort of, Bitcoin, they're keeping, their own currencies relevant. People say that, whether the Bitcoin might weaken the dollar, but actually the opposite might happen. If they take on the Bitcoin as strategic reserve, it means the US are then showing the world it's ready to lead in the digital economy. And other countries are already creating their own type of digital currency. I mean, look at the Chinese. I think it was already the digital yuan, which could compete with the dollar for international trade, especially if the US make it challenging for countries to pay for goods in their own currency. So, and then you have to think about the security. We talked many times on the podcast about the fact that, Bitcoin and the blockchain is an extremely secure facility to utilize. And it could also, if you think Bitcoin could also maybe help with like the national security, the US, often uses the dollar dominance to enforce sanctions, cutting off countries like Russia and Iran from the global banking system. But these countries are now using cryptocurrencies to get around sanctions. If the US builds that Bitcoin reserve, it could help them stay in control of the global crypto flows, giving it new tools to enforce sanctions and maintain its influence over these countries. And also the fact that, by being the focal point for Bitcoin, US would then start to attract the investment and talent associated with it, bring them, to the US. No, Trump's very keen on bringing the talent. He wants, the US to be the capital for crypto around the world. And, if they do adopt it as part of its strategic reserve, it sends a strong signal to the tech and the finance industries. And as many businesses have moved to countries like Switzerland, Singapore, Dubai, because it's unclear of the US regulations. Well, bringing them back, if it's a strategic reserve, these businesses could then flow back into the US and they would rely on the dollar for payroll, taxes, spending, strengthening, etc. like that. So, there's a lot of positives. The last thing I want to say is, whether Bitcoin itself is the sort of the modern gold standard. And, automatically, we've talked, about this. There are some parallels between Bitcoin and gold. The value of the dollar was linked to gold, and, that's why it was called the gold standard. And today, as we've already mentioned, the US holds about $500 billion worth of gold. However, it's not perfect. It's heavy. You can't carry it around. If you have gold, you can't sort of like just take it from country to country. It's hard to move around. Bitcoin, on the other hand, if you have it in your own personal wallet, that solves all those problems. It's easy to transfer, can be divided into, tiny fractions. People can go out there and buy $10 worth of Bitcoin or $10 million worth of Bitcoin, and it's stored on the most secure blockchain known to man. So by holding both gold and Bitcoin, the US creates this sort of hybrid reserve, blending the reliability of gold with the flexibility of digital assets, and make both investors and regular people more confident in the dollar.
Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware, online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Find out more at compassmining.io and get started now. Yeah, there's some great points you bring up in the article, Anthony. And interesting, we saw Nixon take us off the gold backed dollar or the gold standard in, I think, 1971. And there's even talks, if they were to build this Bitcoin strategic reserve up, potentially pegging that to the dollar to once again get that US dollar dominance. So some very interesting macro themes there. The other thing you mentioned, it's ironic, we talk about them auditing Fort Knox and the benefits of gold versus Bitcoin or vice versa. Remember, you guys, Bitcoin is audited every 10 minutes globally, and it has never failed since it's been started. So another real benefit of Bitcoin or blockchain technology compared to maybe the Fort Knox vault style strategy there, Anthony. Now, hearing all of this, the common person would think, wow, this is extremely bullish for Bitcoin. Everything you've talked about in this podcast, in this article, is screaming from the rooftops that this should be a buy. However, if we look at the price of Bitcoin here, Anthony, again, under pressure today in the $88,500 range. Now, what's interesting here, we expected Bitcoin to really be in this holding consolidation pattern until we get that next step up in terms of the strategic Bitcoin reserve or some direction. But the miners have really had some interesting trading today. You'll see on the screen, essentially all of the miners did a complete U-turn here midway through the day. Bitcoin price didn't really move. There hasn't been a lot of news or sector news. We've talked about this on the channel quite extensively, Anthony. It appears to us market manipulation. There's some option strategies. There's institutional investors getting involved. And my personal opinion here is if Bitcoin is going to become the new strategic reserve, that new Bitcoin standard globally, you've got to think Wall Street starts to look at these miners almost as the Federal Reserve or a mint, so to speak, and start thinking, hey, Trump has already followed through on his promise for Ross. He's already followed through on this strategic Bitcoin reserve, at least getting the wheels going. He's already told us he wants Bitcoin made in America. We know these miners operate in America. To me, it seems like a very logical move here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're quite right. Miners on the ascendancy at the moment, but it's been a very volatile 3 months. We spoke on the last podcast. A challenging time for investors. Today we've seen some green shoots, but if you've been in this space for the last 3 months and you haven't sold, I would imagine your portfolios are probably close to half of what they were back in December when the Bitcoin price reached an all-time high of 109,000. So I can feel for a lot of investors out there, we've been sort of like buying certain stocks over the past sort of 6-7 weeks as we've seen these drops and trying to average down some of our prices. But time will tell. I was expecting a little bit more positivity as we were coming this week with obviously these big news items coming up. It's great that he signed off on the strategic reserve, which gives the first process real his approval, and therefore when it goes through to the Senate for their vote, they're aware that the president wants this to happen, and there's enough votes in there to do this. So yeah, as I say, hopefully we finish green at the end of the weekend and we start next week on a good footing with the Bitcoin price getting back into the 90s.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, a great example of that, we covered the DeepSeek news a few weeks back. That broke. You mentioned wiping trillions of dollars off the market in a single day, Anthony. Really, since then, we haven't heard much at all other than Soluna Holdings is actually partnering up to bring DeepSeek R1 to North America. So that turned out to be FUD. We now got some news out yesterday that Microsoft may once again be pulling back from some of the potential CoreWeave deals. That could have some trickle down impact into Core Scientific. They sold off in a tremendous way yesterday as well, down, I think, 10, 15, 20% throughout the day. Once again, though, today, Anthony, we see insider buying at Cores. And if you take a step back, although maybe your gut's telling you, oh my God, what did I get into here in terms of an investment? When you look at the fundamentals, CoreWeave just upsized their deal. We have insider buying. We have a tremendous demand for HPC AI compute, limited resources coming online in the next year. Everything, again, surface level looks bullish here. But once again, the chart, the trading patterns, the share price just not lining up.
No, and that's the challenge. There's been so much positive news out there. Some great results from the companies as well in that last quarter of 2024, and yet we're seeing mining stocks down on average probably 35% since the start of the year. Now, a couple of stocks that stand out that haven't reduced as much as the others. Marathon's only down 7% since the start of the year. CleanSpark just 7%. But on the flip side of that, we've seen Soluna drop 54%. We've seen Bitdeer drop 52%. Now, Bitdeer was probably the standout miner in the last quarter of 2024, where it achieved $26.99 per share. And we see it today around about $11 mark. So significant fall for Bitdeer. And that's the issue. You've got to sort of like cover the fundamental analysis. Make sure that you're happy before you purchase shares because it's a volatile space. Bitcoin's volatile, but nowhere near as volatile as the mining stocks. Bitcoin price has probably dropped 20% in the same period, but the mining stocks have probably, as I say, 32 to 35% as an average there. A couple of stocks have done really well, but the majority well in the 30, 40s and 50% down since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough sector to invest in. You can see in the comments whether or not it's people's first or second cycle, Anthony. But as you say, difficult to watch the portfolio go down day after day. But if you have that strong conviction, the understanding of the business, keep in mind you're not just buying shares on a piece of paper. You're actually becoming an owner in these companies. And you shouldn't really change your opinion on whether or not you want to be an investor and an owner on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, at least in our opinion here. Now, the other interesting point I wanted to bring up, we just mentioned some insider buying at Core Scientific, Jordan Levy going out buying around $500,000 worth. We're getting conflicting information here, Anthony. We've seen a number of CEOs, Fred Thiel, Ben Gagnon at Bitfarms, buying shares on the open market. We just saw another example of that now with Core Scientific. However, we are hearing from some CEOs, Matt Schultz specifically, that this is essentially impossible to do based on the insider knowledge component of leadership, of management. So it sparks really two questions in our mind, Anthony. We talked about this on the other podcast. Number one, if you're not able to buy shares because you have insider knowledge, how are you able to sell shares at any point, especially as we just saw in the case of CleanSpark selling before a large ATM, which obviously was insider information. And then in addition to that, how are these other companies making it work? You'd assume all management has insider information about their respective companies. So a little bit of contradictory information here. We'd love to hear, in your opinion, in the comment section below, what you make of this situation.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a number of CEOs purchase shares over the last 12 months. Ben Gagnon's bought some in Bitfarms. Adam Sullivan bought some when he took over as CEO. And we've seen another director from Core Scientific purchase shares this week and purchased quite a considerable amount of shares, 500,000. I don't like it when CEOs come on Twitter or X and start talking about when they can and when they can't buy shares. But you're quite right. Some of the directors at CleanSpark sold shares a day before an ATM. And that was privileged information because none of us knew about the ATM when the share price reached its all-time high the day before. So that doesn't leave a very popular taste in the retail market, but also in the institutional market. I was at the AIM Summit back in London back in April, and I can tell you now that some of the financial people in the audience there weren't happy with that decision either, and made it quite clear to the senior director of the CleanSpark what they thought of that transaction. So I'd be less inclined to come on Twitter explaining what you can and what you can't do. You ain't going to win that sort of argument, especially after what you did last March.
Yeah. So let us know your guys' thoughts below. We're obviously shareholders in CleanSpark as well. We believe in the company, but a little bit of a head scratcher on this one. So with that being said, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. The weekend's coming up. Hopefully the miners can finish off in the green here. We may or may not get a big announcement out of the crypto summit, and we'll be off to the races to start on Monday. Anthony, thanks for your time. Have a great weekend. We'll see you guys back here Monday.